Okay, so this video is about the first thing I do when I get a new lens. And when I say a new lens, that can be a new or a used lens. Basically, one thing really worth doing, if it's a brand new lens, you can check the firmware, because quite often a new lens won't have the latest firmware on it, because it will have been packaged before, the latest firmware came out, if it's had firmware updates. And with a used lens, you might find that you buy it from somebody and they maybe didn't know to update the firmware, or they just never got around to doing it. So the first thing I'll always do is always check that. So what we can do is, if we jump into the camera, this is slightly different for all kind of camera brands, but I'm using Panasonic Lumix cameras, and specifically I'm using MFT cameras. So we're just going to look at it in that light, just for this video as an example, because that's sort of what I have and what I know, but this really works for pretty much all camera brands. So what you can do is, if we jump into the camera, we'll just hit the menu button. Let me just see if I can actually grab focus on that, more or less. We'll just hit the menu button, and then we just want to be in the wrench or the spanner, and then in the next menu we just want to be the bottom one. It's the wrench or the spanner with 3 dots underneath it, and then just scroll yourself down to firmware version. It starts on card format. You can just press up and then get onto firmware version. You can see here we've got the lens firmware, which is version 1.0. And then what we're going to do is we're going to jump onto the Panasonic website, and we're going to see if that kind of matches up. And the way we do that with this is by most of these lenses, not all of them, and again, this might differ from kind of camera brand to camera brand, but with the Panasonic Lumix lenses, you can usually find the code here. So you can see, you probably can't because it's tiny, but for this, the code for the lens is H-H025, and the numbers in the lens kind of code, they always just match up to whatever the lens focal length is. So that's a 25mm lens. This is the Leica 12-60. You can see if we flip it upside down, we've got HES, but then the numbers are 12060, so 12-60. So they pretty much kind of always match up in that regard. If you can't find it on the bottom of the lens, what you could do is, if you've still got the box, which is a possibility, the code is always on the box, or you can look for the you can look it up online. The thing to do though, if you do it that way, you'll always want to have a look inside here and just make sure that it's the right lens. They've all got different codes, but some of them are Mark 1, Mark 2, and to be honest, a lot of them look identical. They look like exactly the same lens, but there's just ever so slight differences, and some of the lenses have firmware updates that don't apply to the others. So just make sure that you're obviously looking at the right lens. And then for the next part of this, we're just going to jump over to the computer, and we'll just sort of have a look on there and see what's going on. So you could see on here, the firmware version was firmware version 1.1, and this is just an example. I like I say, the first thing I do is I always try and keep my lenses up to date. I've done a video actually about how you can keep them up to date, so I'll link to that up in the corner on how to update lens and body firmware. But what we'll do is we'll jump over to the computer and we'll have a quick look at that part of it. Okay, so for my lenses, like I say, I'm using Micro Four Thirds lenses, Panasonic Lumix. So we're on the Panasonic website, Micro Four Thirds tab. If you're using like an S series camera, you can jump into the full frame tab, and then you've got all of your lenses will be at the bottom. So you've got your cameras there, lenses down here. For Micro Four Thirds, we'll jump into there. You've got your cameras at the top, a bit more of a wide range of cameras, and then a bit of wider range of lenses, all specifically Lumix ones. If your lens is, let's say, like a Sigma lens or Tamron or anything like that, you can jump over to their website, and they will have the firmware updates there for their own lenses. Sometimes they're a slightly different setup, but you can follow the instructions there and find out. So the lens we were looking at was the it's essentially this one here, the H-H025. And if you use the Panasonic website, again, this is just for these. It says you can use this search box, but basically it doesn't work. You hit search, it's supposed to highlight it. It doesn't do anything. Basically, the website just has like errors on it where like none of this works. So don't pay too much attention to that. If you try to search for it and it's not there, it probably is like probably the best way to do it is take your code off your lens, do like a Command F or a Control F, you know, for find, and then just do it that way. That's essentially all this search box does anyway, but like I said, it doesn't work, so just kind of ignore that. And you can see down here the firmware version was firmware version 1.1, which is the one that I had, so you know, that lens is up to date. But the reason I really kind of say to do this is just because the actual improvements that you get on some of these lenses are really good. So take, for example, I've got the 14 to 140, and you can see up here, I believe it is, I think it's that one there, the VSO 14140. If I click on that one, we can have a look through some of the updates, and you can see there's actually improved speed of AF, which obviously, you know, that's a great thing to have on the lens. That's what you want. You've got certain things related to certain features that kind of help it. So you can see here it's in motion picture recording, there's updates. And then some of the, you know, some of the best ones you can actually get are these like improved stability ones. And on I can't remember exactly which lens it was. I had a couple where you get things like you'll have the improved dual IS2 and things like that. So you can see on this one here, you'll get dual IS2 available in a firmware update, which is really good. You can see here, so originally it didn't have dual IS. These are quite old, 2005, 2016, but you know, so for this it didn't have dual IS first off. That got introduced into the lens, and then they introduced dual IS2. So from my kind of understanding of it, I mean, just having dual IS is obviously adds a lot of stability to the lens, but then dual IS2 on top of one, I think adds another half stop of stabilization. So, you know, having that installed on the lens and not having it installed on the lens is going to make quite a significant difference. So, you know, if you've got an older lens and you think, oh, I wish the stabilization was a little bit better, it might be that the firmware potentially is not up to date, and you could check that out, and it sort of breathes a whole new life into some lenses. You know, I've got some older lenses that are fantastic with dual IS2. I mean, I'm using a bit of a newer camera. I'm using the GH6, which has got pretty good stabilization anyway, but I'd say most Micro Four Thirds cameras do have good in-body stabilization, and even the full frame ones now are, you know, they're getting really good IBIS. So it's definitely worth checking this out. And there's also if you've got a brand new camera, that's another reason to check this out, because say for example the kit lens that I showed you, we said it was 12060. You can see on here we've got fairly recent update there, and then if we click on that, we've got things for like when the GH5 Mark II came out, when the GH6 came out. They'll also, this is actually the newer version I've got here, the Leica version. If you click on that, there'll even be ones for the G9 Mark II. So if you've got a newer camera, again, I would make sure that all of this is being updated. And I think one of the best things for me personally, because I shoot video quite a lot and I use manual focus quite a lot, one of the really good things actually is the again, I think it was this one, which I already just clicked on, but let's just try it again. Oh, it may not have been actually. Some of them actually got the focus ring control. So you could use things like linear focus. So I've got a video about that, and I'll link to that. You can kind of check that out. But you know, there's some really nice features that get added to some of these lenses, and yeah, it's just totally worth checking out. You know, if there are any little features you're kind of missing out on your lens. And like I say, there's a video about how to update body firmware, lens firmware, all of that. And again, I'll link that up in the corner. So yeah, hopefully you found this video helpful. If you have, give it a like. If you want to see more content like this, check out the Lumix playlist on this channel, and please subscribe.